Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We usually have the Chiron over here. I got the magma flow of the Ravens magma coming through here from our friends at Sporticulture. It is Chicken Palooza at Royal Farms, which means it's Chicken Palooza here. My shirt's in the wash, Luke, so I'm wearing my Raskin Global shirt. I'm left-right on the video here. Now that we're zooming, now that people get to see how beautiful my home and downtown and the Inner Harbor and the stadia all look, I hope they all get inspired to go get some Chicken Palooza here. 10 cents from every Chicken Palooza box sold, donated to benefit Johns Hopkins. That means eat more chicken at the chicken. I tell you what, Chicken Palooza, Western fries. We're going to have a Western Fry Day. We had National Chicken Wing Day last week. I want to know we're going to have National Western Fry Day. I'm all about that. Luke, I know we're going to have this week. I saw some friends over the weekend tweeting in and out of Owings Mills. Phil, longtime photographer, talking about his media day shoot, and saw Lamar Jackson doing all sorts of interesting things on Instagram and whatnot over the weekend. It's going to be weirdest, I think, for you, right? Because you're not out there on the backfields watching them and running around and doing all the stuff that we do in this sort of the normal way that we always do it. And what they're doing, you've experienced baseball from the media fisheye lens here this week, and I know we talked a lot about that on Monday. The football thing's about to get going, and on the shadow of all of this, Doug Peterson tests positive on Sunday night for COVID. Welcome to spring football, summer football, whatever they're going to call it. I just miss boring Falcons preseason games where no one plays. We all sweat our asses off.
That was definitely a nice problem when the preseason games and how boring they are were the worst problem that you had. But you just mentioned it, Doug Peterson, and let's face it, we didn't exactly need a reminder. I mean, players have been testing positive, players have been opting out. It's been different, and
it's real.
To the point you just made, they're in Owings Mills, and veterans took physicals over the weekend, and so far, so good for the Ravens on that front. They had a couple players, of course, opt out with DeAnthony Thomas and Andre Smith. Nigel Warrior, a rookie undrafted safety, was on the reserve COVID list when the rookies reported. But they've been good on that front to this point. We know it can change very quickly, so no complacency there. And I think the organization certainly is not feeling any complacency in that regard. But it's definitely different. I think I said in our previous baseball segment that this time of year suddenly feels like April for me because baseball season has started. And I was thinking about this.
Dude, they're playing hockey games in the other room.
Well, you have that. You have the NBA. But I was thinking for me personally, we're now in a couple days into August, and this is the first time since 2008 that I'm not going to either Westminster or Owings Mills for training camp and doing training camp reports and sweating and watching guys practice and seeing John Harbaugh at the podium, not talking about injuries, even though the first game's 6 weeks away. Like, that whole routine that I'm so used to. And look, many fans are too, whether you made the trip to McDaniel College all those years, or you've been someone that's been able to go out to training camp the last couple of years, or you just consume. All you're getting right now are just some snapshots from the Ravens. And even with them, they're not practicing yet. The rookies have started conditioning, and they're doing some walkthrough stuff. Veterans will start doing that kind of stuff this week. But we're in this ramp-up period now, and we know there are no preseason games. We know that full contact practices aren't going to start until, I think, August 17th is the current schedule that's lined up. So football season is here, but it doesn't feel anything like football season so far because we just don't have that access. Now, the Ravens are doing
only
Zoom.
my magma lamp from Sporticulture.
Yeah.
That's the only normal thing we have. By the way,
Right.
we're getting a new one. It's going to have black magma in it. I don't know if that means the death of the season or not. I was kidding with Court last week about it.
That's a little ominous.
Yeah, he said the black one looks kind of killer. I think the purple looks kind of good, though. I mean, now that you can see it on the Zoom, so I can ask you about stuff on the studio now. Say, how do I look, Luke? How do I look?
Yeah, but this is definitely weird. And to be clear, I mean, the Ravens are making, they made John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins, Patrick Queen available via Zoom last week. We'll have more coaches and players available this week, but just not being in the building, not being on the practice field. Media is not going to be in the building all year. And look, that's the okay call. I'm not saying that they're
I'm interested in is how weird is it for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's certainly weird for us, and we get it. And I don't, we saw the Harbaugh thing the other day, and Lamar, and all of it feels a little weird, and they're trying to be the eyes and the ears, and I'm sure they wouldn't leverage this for Ravens.com in any way, would they? I'm sure they'll show some of the weirdness of it all, but much like our baseball conversation where there are dudes, and I think I'm one of them, that probably would perform a lot better in an empty stadium as a baseball player, focused in on it, that the football part of this, most of what they do happens on those backfields amongst a couple of attaboys, and you're so used to that sound, right? Mm-hmm. And then that sound changes for you when the fans are allowed in, right? When the fans come in August, there is a little bit more action, a little bit more noise, but you have a really fascinating view of this that I don't have because you're out there far more than I am, of silent football and silent practice and those catches that Odell Beckham makes in practice that only he sees and they show up on the coach's tape or whatnot on Wednesday and Thursday, and how precise the sport is. That part of the ballet, you're very familiar with the silence of that.
Yeah, no question about it, to the point where they actually pipe in crowd noise to practice. Right. So now you have this environment, and look, training camp, they don't do as much of that. And 2,000 Ravens fans being at a training camp practice is a little different than playing at Heinz Field in late December. But there is an atmosphere to it. There's a rhythm to it. There's a buzz to it. And players have talked about that. I mean, especially the rookies who go through rookie camp, they go through OTAs, they go through mandatory minicamp, and each step ramps up a little bit. They all talk about it.
Then the kids show up for autographs afterward.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to that.
There's a different sort of decorum when fans are there, right? I mean,
there really is, and I think that's what's going to be. I mean, that's very much going to be missing. I mean, and to a degree, we had similar conversations when the Ravens decided to leave Westminster and hold training camp in-house. And, there was that gradual transition of being able to accommodate more fans coming out. But players talked about it. They said that not having fans at training camp, it's definitely goes back to that baseball conversation we talked about. You have to be more of a self-starter. And one thing I will say, football inherently, there's still a soundtrack to it. When it's quiet, you're still seeing the linemen bust heads every play, and the players react, and there's more players on the field. And baseball, a sport like that, the action is very isolated, right? It's pitcher, batter, catcher, or balls hit to the right fielder. There's a cutoff, so it's still there's still an isolated way that it's synchronized. Whereas in football, I mean, you have 22 different players going at it on one play. So it's definitely different watching it in silence. And I'm really fascinated to see not so much training camp, because as you pointed out, I've been able to personally experience that. But once we get into game type settings, how that flow is going to work, it's going to be very strange. Because like I said, there's not going to be a need to pipe in crowd noise for Thursday and Friday practices on a game week, because, well, even they go to Heinz Field, it's going to be empty. So it's just very weird. And look, I mean, there's so much to this to unpack in terms of what these teams are doing. I know, Dick Cass has talked about it through various interviews and Zoom chats throughout the spring and the summer with various groups, that I know they've put in a heck of a lot of work. I mean, to accommodate, I think the fact that they recently renovated and expanded their
them as an organization, all these organizations, right?
Oh, no doubt. And I mean, they're in a good spot because of their facility and the fact that they just expanded that facility compared to, let's say this happened 17, 18 years ago when they were still in the old building in Owings Mills. I mean, trying to do that. I mean, there are teams in this league. I mean, the Steelers, who normally have training camp in Latrobe, they're having training camp at Heinz Field because their normal practice facility can't accommodate a 90-man roster, now an 80-man roster. And
I've been in
the
that building. It's a
facilities are
smaller
just
building. It is. I mean,
yeah,
it
yeah. I
wasn't
mean,
built for 100 people. It was built for a football team, you know?
and now you're saying built for 80 players with social distancing built into it. Before they could kind of make it work. You can add some utility lockers and you can make it work. But they had their OTAs in Pittsburgh. But all these teams are trying to figure this out now.
Can
And
I tell a
I mean, the
funny
Ravens.
story?
Don't get me wrong. The Ravens have had to expand. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, the day I was with Tomlin, he took me to the building, right? And he took me to his office. And I said, I want to use your bathroom. Just to say I did it one time on the race. It took me 5 years. So, yeah, I have used Mike Tomlin's bathroom in there. I've soiled his facility. I said I wanted to do that. You can only imagine, how blue I was working that day when I said I wanted to, drop a deuce in his toilet. But I have been in there, and it was kind of striking that it was small. It was very like old school Owings Mills kind of small. Like, hey, shouldn't you guys be in something bigger? And I was in Pennsylvania the other day, and I drove by the Eagles facility, and it looks like it's sort of on a farm. Like downtown, it has all of this stately area around it and fresh air around it in the middle of like the city, right across the street from where the vet was. So all of these places are built different, but built to keep guys safe. Doug Peterson's sick. I mean, talk about Philadelphia. I'm looking at the building. There was COVID there the other day because Doug Peterson's got it, right?
Yeah, and there's always the question of where it came from. It doesn't mean he got it in the building, but he tested positive. But to go back to what I was saying about the Ravens, even with the expansion that they've had, their cafeteria, they've added a massive tent that's air conditioned. They basically doubled the square footage of their cafeteria. One player or one person per table. Everything is kind of pre-wrapped. They no longer have the serving line where it's kind of buffet style. I mean, it's quite different. And they have done this. They've had to reimagine essentially everything they do. Their weight room set up differently now. They only have a certain number of players allowed in there. I mean, you can't have players not lift weights for football season. I mean, these are parts of the game that we know from a virus standpoint, certain areas and facilities, indoor dining, gyms, things that largely have remained closed or at least at a very reduced capacity. Now you have the NFL trying to adapt to this. So these teams, I know the Ravens, I don't know the details of every modification and certainly don't know the details as far as the other 31 teams, but they have gone to great lengths and now they're at the point where they're trying to execute it. So the rookies came in, rookies did their testing, they did their physicals, they're now doing their weight and conditioning program and some walkthroughs. Veterans took their physicals over the weekend after they did their testing last week, 2 tests just to get into the building, I almost said positive, meaning negative, but positive meaning good results, but just to get into the building. And now they're getting into that strength and conditioning ramp up phase. So, it's kind of staggered and they've always done that to a degree. The rookies and quarterbacks and injured vets have always reported before the rest of the veterans, but it's a little more staggered and a little more pronounced because of the testing involved and testing every day. We're still waiting to see as far as guys opting out, not necessarily for the Ravens, but around the rest of the league. So there are a lot of moving parts to this and it will continue to be that way. And I think they have prepared and I don't think there's been a lack of effort, but now we see how effective it's going to be, how realistic and how pragmatic it's going to be. And now, it's here. It's here for real now. I mean, we've talked over and over since March about the NFL having what advantage on its side? Time, the ability to plan that NBA, NHL shut down. Major League Baseball didn't even get started because they shut down 2 weeks before the start of the season. The NFL has been able to make it work. Free agency, challenges with physicals and bringing players in for visits, but you could still conduct business for the most part. The draft ended up being a success the way they did it. I think there's probably some thoughts to doing some of those elements moving forward, besides the lucrative nature of having it at one site. But now you get to the football part of it and you've tried to do as much as you can to prepare. You've accommodated, you've modified your buildings. You've stretched the lockers out. Some teams have moved to their stadium, like what the Steelers are doing, to try to use both locker rooms. So you have 2 locker rooms set up for 2 teams, but now you need that much space for your one team. So here we go. And it's very different, and they're still not on the field hitting yet. And it's early August, and that part's already weird. And, here soon, we're going to be coming up on the period of time where you're expecting preseason games, and there are no preseason games. So it's very, very different. And, on a personal level, that's where it doesn't feel like football season to me, because, we're having some Zoom chats with players and coaches, but I haven't stepped foot in the confines of their training facility since March.
Well, I mean, all joking about Mike Tomlin's commode in Pittsburgh, that place is attached to the Pitt Panthers facility,
Mm-hmm.
and it was small. And this is fascinating for me, from a competitive standpoint, because
Sure.
you and I have spent so much time talking about baseball and sort of the farce of it for me. Cespedes opting out. The Nationals have none of their players. The Patriots are fielding none of their players. C.J. Mosley is opted out. There are guys all over the league with all sorts of issues who are going to need to opt out because of family situation, their wife, what their kids are doing, where their kids are going to school. We have teachers. Luke, if you were still teaching at some Baltimore private school, they would expect you to show up for work right now. Your brother who you live with, if he was immune compromised, you might not like that. So, you know what I mean? So we have all of these questions being asked. But from the Steelers and from a straight being competitive in every way, when it really disrupts their organization in that way that they can't even use their own facility, and the Ravens could sort of modify, when you start getting into those little advantages that every Bill Belichick and John Harbaugh loves to have, that they all want 1 extra hour of practice or 1 extra hour of rest, or what everything. I mean, they measure all of that, and they're all maniacal about it. And I haven't talked to Dick, and I haven't heard much from Dick in a couple of months, and I hope to get him on before the month's over for sure. Couple of things stick out to me here. First off, it's this. It's early, right? It's August, whatever, early August, my mother's birthday. And they don't play till like September 13th. It's really weird. I looked at the schedule, and it's late, and I'm like, man, this is 6 weeks where every Doug Peterson – that they have to make sure that this doesn't happen. Every Dick Cass has been busting his butt, and every employee in the building in every way has been trying to make sure it's clean. And you and I have been in that building 1,000 times. There's always Purell at the front door. It's always flu season in October, November, December. Somebody's always sick. How many times do you see Joe Flacco step up to the mic and have like a head cold? And he's got 5 kids running around, and you're like, oh, my God, if he gets it, Skurr's got it. If he's got it, Ingram's got it. If they got it 2 weeks from now, we play Denver, oh, my God, right? So this is the stuff that keeps Harbaugh up at night all the time, right? And it's why he's maniacal that he is maniacal. And I hear all of this, and then, like, the Miami Marlins are coming to town, and you're about to spend a couple of days with them down at the ballpark, right? They're going to be the home team. They're going to be the visiting team. And you say to yourself, I think the Ravens are an incredible organization. They're well run. Dick's been doing it forever. I give them high marks. I think you do as well, as to what they do and how they do it versus their peers, versus any sports team anywhere. By and large, I give the Orioles very low marks. I've witnessed it. I did the baseball tour back in 2015. There were teams that felt really buttoned up, and there were teams that were just like not. And you could feel it. You could see it. The Marlins have nobody at their ballpark. Jeter's coming in. What the hell does he know about running a team? Nothing. He knows how to play shortstop, a little bit of third base. Gift baskets, but that's for another story. But, dude, I would just say that for the Marlins to have someone in their organization, even if it's someone as competent as, I don't know, TJ Brightman, that having – 17 players get dirty on a weekend up in Atlanta and Philadelphia. Dick can do whatever Dick wants to do. And Calais Campbell can do whatever Calais Campbell's going to do. But the Eagles just had their head coach go dirty, right? Like, literally. This is not going to be easy. And
no.
I know that, and I just really want to, like, frame this, that when you and I go into fantasy land, which is they're going to play 16 football games over 18 weeks, and they're going to play 3 weeks of playoffs, and somehow there's going to be a Super Bowl in Tampa that you and I are going to broadcast from, or not, but that they're going to play. Not buying it, bro. I mean, I'll buy into your fantasy, and I'm into all of that, but I know how hard they've worked, and I still think even how hard they've worked and what they've tried to do, and I respect it immensely. On behalf of everyone like us that wants to watch it, I just think that the virus is going to make the rules, and I'll just leave it at that. But that's a meandering way of saying, if they do play football, this is going to be harder on the Steelers. They don't even have their own building because their building's not set up for it, in the same way that if you were teaching second grade and your classroom weren't set up for it, you couldn't teach second grade for more than 7 kids.
Well, and I mean, how about even take it a step further for the fact that if you're actually going to try to do this, you want to win, right? You want to be successful. How about a Kevin Stefanski, the new coach of the Cleveland Browns, who is just physically laying his eyes on his team for the first time over the last week or so. So you throw that into it. I mean, yeah, it's going to be really tough. I mean, we've seen interviews with even some of the big shots within the NFL, and they've acknowledged this is going to be difficult. I think there's a way that they can complete a season? Can it be done? Okay. Do I think it's going to go smoothly and perfectly, that they're going to play 16, each team's going to play 16 games in 17 weeks, and you're not going to have at least 1 or 2 examples like we've already seen with baseball, with the Marlins, with the Cardinals, where you have to have some postponements? I think that's quite likely that we'll see something like that. I think it's possible we could see a season, but it might be 14 games because they have to have some cancellations because of some outbreaks within teams. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's going to be very difficult, and it's a lot to navigate. And as I said, even within that navigation from a COVID perspective, there's so much that you still have to do just to try to win, right? I mean, and that's where the Ravens do have an advantage because they have so much continuity. Just think if Greg Roman had become the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, or Wink Martindale became the head coach of the Giants. They interviewed for jobs back in January. If they had left and you had a new coordinator, or let's say this happened a year ago, we were talking so much about this new Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson and the revolution and Greg Roman replacing Marty Morningwig. Can you imagine trying to pull off all of that in the midst of this? So there is so much to this, just to be able to get on the field and stay on the field and stay healthy and keep your players eligible to be able to play from a COVID standpoint. And then you get into, how does all of that navigation impact the actual football part of this? That's where I mentioned to you when we were talking about this from a baseball standpoint with the pitchers, with their elbows and shoulders and some of the injuries and health concerns we've seen there. I'm very interested to see how these players respond when they finally get on the practice field here over the next couple of weeks. Not that they're out of shape or 40 pounds overweight, but just not being in pads, not being in a helmet, not practicing, not having OTAs, not having mandatory minicamp, and all the distancing that they're having to do. Guys that were able to train, but not train in their normal way that they like to train in the off season. I wonder, do we see more injuries in that way? So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here to imagine how a season goes. And when you do, even if you're imagining being able to start, continue, and finish a season, to think that there aren't going to be some hiccups, to think that there might not be some postponements, maybe not wide scale, but at least a couple here and there. I mean, we've already seen what we've seen in baseball over the course of 10 days. So, it is difficult to imagine it going without a hitch.
Well, you wonder where the ledge is too. I've been tweeting out a lot and being, the guy that I am, saying no matter what, certainly every time I see Rob Manfred, He speaks like a real-world attorney running a $2 billion industry who isn't going to shut this down. And if a couple of people die along the way, well, so be it. You know what I mean? Like, literally, it feels that way to me. Like, it just feels like there's nothing that's going to shut this down because do you know how much money we're talking about, Luke? Because integrity's already gone. The integrity of, like, having a real season and a championship for the sake of doing it and to have a parade and to turn us all on and get us all down to the ballpark and to create industry, that's all, like, that's not even on the table. Like, even for the Yankees, if they win 52 games, like, literally, that's like, even for them, it's not going to be any fun in that way. So I do wonder, in the deeper part of this is, all right, the NFL is opening the season, and I'm all shucksing it, and I'm making fun of it, and I'm saying there's no way they can finish it, and they might just because they don't care whether C.J. Mosley plays. They don't care whether Lamar Jackson's mother gets sick or not. I mean, literally, they're just going to go and do this, and baseball's going to go and do this no matter how many Marlins get sick or how many Cardinals get sick. And the Eagles aren't going to shut their building down because their head coach got the virus on Sunday night. So I just, I mean, if there's some American spirit there that I'll hear. I mean, there's also some real American idiocy and stupidity involved in this as well. And I'll be glad to point that out because Nestor's not going out without a mask. Nestor's not playing football. I don't need to be high-fiving Lamar Jackson or his mom or John Harbaugh or anybody else that's been high-fiving other dudes without masks, period, who've been going home and ordering out food and having their kids go places, doing all the things that when Rudy Gobert shut this thing down in March, kind of told ourselves not to do, and now we're just going to go do it. And I think it's no matter what. So because it's no matter what, now with baseball, to me, 10 days into this, and we've already had a team literally catch the plague for 2 weeks, and we just said, well, we'll make some games up, we'll shave some games off the end, but as long as they can get that win in tonight in Seattle, we're going to keep this thing going. That's the way they're going to roll this. Like, if the Stones went out and Mick got sick, they would just roll Keith up there and let him play, honky-tonk woman. Yeah, like, literally, that's what they're doing. And alleging that there's a championship at the end of this of integrity, I throw my hands up, and I'm going to talk about it as long as they're out there playing. But I'm going to tell you that no matter what thing concerns me, and I'm going to write about it this week.
Well, I mean, I don't know if someone would die, I don't think they'd continue at that.
Okay, so where's the line then?
Well, hey, I'm not the commissioner.
This is what we would do if we're doing stupid 105.7 radio right now. Open the phone lines. What would make them? Well, Lamar's mother dies. This person dies. A coach gets really sick. He's intubated. What if Doug Peterson's hospitalized on Wednesday? Does that shut it down? I don't know, dude. I mean, like, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm saying, right. No matter what. We had a baseball team last week, pissed dirty, the whole team, dirtying up a clubhouse so another team couldn't come in. Another team voted and said, we don't want to play them. Now they're going to play the Orioles. Now you're going to go down there and mix up with them after they got on a bus. No, but they got on a bus. Who drove the bus? Who drove the bus back to Florida? Like, these are the questions I have in the middle of a plague that supersede, like, the guy's last name that I can't even give me his last name.
Pat Valaika.
Valaika. Yeah, like, these are more important issues to me than Pat Valaika and whether the Orioles are going to be 5-3 and you've already thrown the towel in on them. I mean, they're over 500. You're giving them no chance. Debbie Downer.
No, I didn't give them a chance before the season.
I know I'm rambling here, and I'm going to continue to ramble about this because when we do talk about football, as we're going to right now, where Matt Skura is physically unable to perform, and we've had other comings and goings on the roster, and Dalen Mack, right? So there's some news, and I want to take that seriously, but I'm trying to figure out what that means to my life in December. And if they're going to really be 11-3, and I'm going to be sitting here, drinking eggnog and talking about playoff games, because I can't get on board with that as anything other than something that feels like fantasy land to me in a good way. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Then I go back to the reality of Doug Peterson was dirty last night. So what happens if he's hospitalized Thursday? I don't know where the end of this pier is. And to your point that you made earlier, baseball shut down, basketball shut down, hockey shut down. They all went away. Football, well, let's draft players. We can do that safely. Cool. Now they're opening up the door, and they're doing it for 6 weeks. And I wouldn't give you $1 right now if you give me bet on red or bet on black that they're going to play September 13th. Because I think this is slippery once you start.
Well, I mean, we'll see. Did you think baseball was going to start?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would say if they're testing every day like they are at least the first couple of weeks, and I think, by the way, that should continue if they really want to make this work. I think I don't see why football couldn't start from the standpoint of what did baseball have going for it during summer camp, and then we saw them run into problems when they started traveling. These guys aren't going to be traveling for preseason games. They are going to be able to stay as centralized. It's not a bubble, but it's the closest thing they get to having a bubble because it is one facility where they're practicing.
Go home, stay home, don't touch anyone.
Right. So, and if you're testing, that should prevent the likelihood of someone practicing with the virus and passing it on to teammates that they're practicing against. Theoretically, I'm not saying that won't happen, but if there's one aspect to the argument where you do look at football and say, where might they have an advantage to baseball compared to the obvious that you can't socially distance in football, like baseball generally socially distances, it's that the travel is much more controlled and more limited than baseball, where you're traveling all over the place. You're going from one city to the next, and then, you have a 3-city road trip. I mean, even in the context of this 60-game season, that's a sprint, not a marathon, like we normally think of 162. Football, the big question, beyond the obvious of just managing that many people, and it's a bigger roster, it will be the traveling aspect to it, like I thought it would be all along for baseball, but they only travel for 8 games compared to multiple cities, even multiple cities in the same week. So if there's one area where I don't want to say it's an advantage, but relatively speaking, maybe it's a little more tenable, maybe. But then you get into the fact that you huddle, you have all these guys in the building preparing, and there are meetings and all those different things that they're trying to avoid the human contact as much as possible. But inevitably, you're going to be out on the field, and it's not as though you're going to have guys, this isn't going to be like the CFL where you line up a yard off the line of scrimmage. I mean, it's still football at the end of the day. So, it's going to be challenging. There's no question about that. And I think they can navigate the 6 weeks. And look, they need 6 weeks. You can't have these guys show up and then play.
I understand that.
And
we were seeing pitchers try to do it right now.
Sure.
You can't do it.
So, you have the ramp up period. You hope over that period, guys adhere to the new protocols and they get used to it. And I think that's part of it too, besides just lifting weights and running.
Well, here's the hardest part for me. Doug Peterson, who's the team leader, right? Like, John's going to stand in front of them and say, don't touch anybody. Don't be the one that brings it into my bill, our bill. We're all in the dig. How does Doug Peterson do that now? Like, the coach got it. You know what I mean? Like,
but do you use that? But I'll flip that around and say
anyone can get it.
Isn't that a great teachable moment? Assuming Doug Peterson wasn't out on the town in Philadelphia on Friday night, and that's how he got the virus, which I don't know. I'm guessing probably not. I'm guessing whether he got it from someone in his family or some kind of chance interaction or encounter. I don't know, but I think it could be a teachable moment to say, hey, this doesn't even have to be the 22-year-old reserve corner who is a fringe roster guy, decided to go out with some buddies and have some drinks at the local establishment. The head coach got it. So maybe it serves as a teachable moment in the same way that, we've talked about it with baseball, with the Marlins. If this thing's going to have any chance for baseball to be able to endure, you hope the 29 other teams and the players on those teams, that was a wake-up call to say, hey, this is how quickly it took days for that to spiral out of control. Does it serve as a teachable moment? So I don't know the answer to that. I think for some guys, it'll be absolutely yes. I think for the most guys, it'll be absolutely yes. But as I just said, it takes one or two guys to make bad decisions, and then you have a major problem on your hands. So hey, I don't know the answers here, Ness, and I'm not going to proclaim that to know that it's going to work.
Yeah, we're going to follow whatever they do. They're
yeah.
I mean, I will continue to ask no matter what. I mean, like what is the breaking point of you stopping something that most of the scientists would have told you shouldn't be doing to begin with? That the Rolling Stones aren't doing right now, that Pearl Jam's not doing right now, that nobody in the world's doing right now, that you're trying to do.
But they're not having 70,000. I mean, let's not say that they're just going on business as usual. I mean, they're not having fans in the stadiums. You know, I mean, the Rolling Stones.
But the football players are breathing on each other in a different kind of way than baseball players are. That's why I give it far. And there's more of them. Yeah, but I've met them over the course of time. And I think Dick Cass and John Harbaugh can think and do and say whatever they want to do with 24-year-old guys that
at the
problems are going to happen.
But didn't we also learn if there was one, I don't even want to say it's a silver lining because it sounds too optimistic, but we didn't see all these Marlin players who tested positive. We didn't see the Phillies have a mass outbreak just because they played a game against them. So you do get into a case where you say it's not as though an offensive and a defensive lineman are just standing next to each other 6 inches away for 10 minutes at a time. It's a few seconds here and there. What does that mean? You know, I know David Chow, for example, has talked about the concept of viral load, and he doesn't think the actual games themselves will be the issue. He thinks the much greater challenge is the locker room, the facility, the weight room, the training room, when guys are just getting treatment. You know, not talking about guys because they're sick, but guys that are getting their ankle wrapped and all of those different things, and the trainers and the staffers and the coaches. You know, he's more concerned about everything but the actual on-field aspect to it, which was interesting. And that doesn't mean he's right either. And he'd be the first to tell you, just because I was a team doctor in the NFL doesn't mean that I'm an expert on COVID-19 by any stretch. So, you know, there's so much unknown to this. I think there are elements to this that may end up being very surprising, things that might be more problematic than anyone's envisioning right now. And there might be other things that they think and they're anticipating, wow, this is the part that really makes me nervous. And maybe they find out that that's not that big of an issue. As I mentioned, the Marlins had this huge outbreak. And even go back, Rudy Gobert, when he tested positive, I forget which team he played the night before, but the guy who guarded him the entire night with Gobert being positive, he tested negative. So not minimizing the virus, but again, speaks to the unknown. And we try to make these assumptions, and then we find out maybe that isn't the case. You know, maybe certain elements of this aren't going to be as big of a deal. And we find out, you know, thinking that it is, and it's no big deal. But then there's something we're not even thinking about right now. And maybe even the experts and these teams and, you know, the Dick Casses of the league and you know, the trainers and team doctors for each team might not even be thinking about. And all of a sudden, 3 weeks into camp, oh my gosh, this is something we didn't consider, but it's a problem now. So, you know, there's a lot of trial and error to this, and that's where
I have admiration that they're trying. Yeah. I do. I do, but I think at the risk to whom and how much risk is too much risk. And I don't think that's been identified, and I'm really worried. I am, given the moral bankruptcy of some of the people who tend to run these organizations.
And that's fair. And I'm not going to argue with you on that by any stretch. You know, and that's where, you know, I'll come back to, I have all the respect in the world for players who make the difficult decision to opt out. You know, that's their right. And I think it's as a fan base, can you be disappointed about it? Just, oh, we're not going to have this guy. Sure. Can you be disrespectful to that? No way. I mean, people will be disrespectful about it, but they shouldn't be. But, you know, it's definitely, there's a lot to this. And that's why I said to you, going back to the Marlins thing, and I know we're, you know, going back and forth football and baseball, but baseball is the example we have to draw from right now because the NBA and the NHL and MLS have been in a bubble scenario. So it's
pioneers, you know, take the arrows.
Kind of apples to oranges. But, the one thing that I said about Major League Baseball, that I could kind of understand the steps since then, but for them to play that Marlins-Phillies game last Sunday was just unconscionable that the players were even allowed to vote to play. It should have never gotten to that point. It should have been in their protocol that, multiple positive tests, postponement. And the good thing is now, Ness, since then, we've seen, the Cardinals and Brewers this past weekend, postponements with players, some positive tests. So are we learning to a degree that we're going to be able to navigate it now? I have no idea. I'm skeptical. I have my doubts. I have questions and concerns just like anyone else. But some of this is going to be, and it's a scary term to use because we're talking about the well-being of players and, forgetting about the worst case scenarios even for a minute, just their livelihood, just something that happens like Eduardo Rodriguez for the Red Sox. He's out for the rest of the year because he has a heart condition that's COVID related. They think he's going to be fine long-term, but until he's fine, there's going to be some unknown there. So that's where you do have some of these players like a Michael Pierce, for example, who opted out. He has asthma. That's something. He's a 300+ pound defensive tackle with asthma. Probably a good decision on his part, and certainly a personal decision that he was well within his right to make. So, it does come down to some personal choices here, but to your point, and I'm asking the same question, where is that line? Where is that line where you say, this isn't going to work. This isn't tenable. This is way too dangerous. We're not going to get to the finish line. We're not going to have any semblance of a representative season. I don't know what the answers to those questions. I hope for the sake of everyone involved that those discussions have taken place internally and they've tried to envision as many scenarios as possible. And you're not going to imagine all of them because again, we're all figuring this thing out still. And when I say we, even the experts are still trying to figure this thing out. But you hope that they are over preparing for as many scenarios as they can think of and kind of coming up with where that line's going to be. And you hope that it's not a line that's too far over what the line should be, to a reasonable degree, I guess, most people thinking about this. And, that's what's tough because you have an opinion about this. I have an opinion about this. Fans have an opinion about this. Coaches, players, owners. I mean, there are a lot of people involved on, emotionally, directly attached to this, financially attached to this. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to consider here on so many different levels, and a lot of people that really want to try to make this work. But ultimately, is it going to be doable? And that's the big question that we really can't answer right now, even if some of us have really strong opinions one way or the other about it.
Here's Luke Jones. You can find him out on Twitter and Instagram and the Facebook thing, doing it. Oriole Park at Camden Yards, the Marlins in, socially distanced, zooming in and out with Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh, and out at Baltimore, Luke, as well. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, and all the same places, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We are merging WNST.net with a hat back here and the Baltimore Positive hat here, and we're going to get a new Magma lamp from Sporticulture. Celebrating all of our sponsors here all month long. Make sure you eat some Taharka ice cream. Also, I was cleaning my glasses off with my Roos Chris eyeglass cleaner here, so I want to bring that up with beautiful. I never seen the original Chris Steakhouse in New Orleans. Next Super Bowl we win, I'm taking you to the original one. How about that, Luke? I haven't been down there. We're going to do that. You can find me anytime, anywhere, Nasty at WNST.net. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and of course, Baltimore Positive and keeping it real.